Marcus slammed the eviction notice on Eleanor's kitchen table. The papers scattered across the polished wood like fallen leaves. "Pack your bags, old woman. This house is mine now." Eleanor's weathered hands trembled as she picked up the legal documents, her 70-year-old eyes scanning words that would change everything. Steam rose from her untouched coffee cup. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the sudden silence. Cold marble pressed against Eleanor's palms as she steadied herself against the counter. "I don't understand," Eleanor whispered. Her voice carried the weight of 27 years raising this man. "This is my home, Marcus. I've lived here since before you could walk." Brittany stepped forward, her arms crossed like a shield. 28 years old with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that cost more than Eleanor's monthly budget. "Actually, it's not," she said, her voice sharp as winter wind. "The deed shows Marcus inherited this property from his biological mother. You're just a tenant who overstayed her welcome." Eleanor had raised Marcus since he was 8. She remembered his first day of school, his graduation, his wedding. She'd worked double shifts as a janitor to pay for his college tuition. Now, he stood in her kitchen like a stranger. "You're not even real family," Brittany continued. "Blood matters. Marcus has been supporting you long enough." The words hit Eleanor like physical blows. She'd heard whispers in the neighborhood lately, people talking about how she was taking advantage of Marcus's success, how she should be grateful for his generosity, how elderly people needed to know their place. "I understand," Eleanor said quietly. Her dignity remained intact despite the crumbling world around her. "I'll be gone by Friday." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. For a moment, his face softened. "Eleanor, Don't," Brittany interrupted. "She's had 30 years of free housing. That's more than most people get." Eleanor nodded slowly. She'd raised Marcus to be better than this, taught him about kindness, respect, and family values. But people change. Sometimes they forget where they came from. The neighbors knew Eleanor as the quiet woman who kept to herself. They saw her walking to the bus stop every morning for 40 years, dressed in her simple cleaning uniform. They assumed she lived on Social Security and Marcus's charity. They had no idea about the phone calls she cut short when people entered the room. "Not now, Mr. Peterson," she'd whispered into her phone just yesterday when Marcus walked into the kitchen. She'd hung up quickly, sliding the phone into her pocket like a secret. The stack of unopened mail on her counter caught the morning light. Official envelopes marked confidential and private wealth management. Eleanor always collected these letters before anyone else could see them, small habits that had protected her for decades. Her antique jewelry box sat on the windowsill, catching sunbeams. Most people would dismiss it as costume jewelry. They didn't know how to recognize real diamonds hidden in plain sight. "I'll need a few days to arrange things," Eleanor said. She moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, her movements economical and purposeful. Even now, facing homelessness, she maintained her composure. 3 days, Marcus said. "I'm having the locks changed Monday." Friday morning arrived with unexpected warmth. Eleanor stood in the doorway of what had been her home for 3 decades. One suitcase held her entire visible life. The neighbors gathered on their porches, some pretending to water plants, others openly staring. Mrs. Chen from next door shook her head sadly. "Poor thing. At her age, where will she go?" "Marcus is doing the right thing," Mr. Rodriguez replied. "Young people need to build their own lives. She had a good run." Eleanor heard every word. She'd heard similar conversations for weeks. The community had already decided her fate. She was the elderly woman who'd outlived her usefulness. Marcus appeared with his phone, recording her departure. "For legal protection," he explained to Brittany, loud enough for Eleanor to hear. "In case she tries to come back?" Eleanor picked up her suitcase. 27 years of memories reduced to 40 pounds of belongings. She'd taught Marcus to ride a bicycle on this sidewalk, cheered at his high school football games, paid for his wedding reception at the country club. "I taught you better than this, son," she said quietly. Marcus looked away. "Things change, Eleanor. People have to take care of themselves." The bus arrived with a wheeze of brakes and diesel fumes. Eleanor climbed aboard, her suitcase bumping against the steps. She found a seat near the back and watched her former neighborhood disappear through smudged windows. The bus driver, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes, caught her gaze in the rearview mirror. "You okay, ma'am?" "I'm fine," Eleanor replied. And strangely, she meant it. Something had shifted inside her during those 3 days of packing. A quiet strength she'd almost forgotten she possessed. The bus rolled toward downtown Chicago. Eleanor watched the city change outside her window. Suburban lawns gave way to apartment buildings, then office towers. She'd made this journey every day for 40 years, but never as a homeless woman. Her phone buzzed. A text from Pastor Williams at St. Mary's Church. "Your room is ready. God provides." Eleanor smiled softly. The pastor meant well, but he didn't understand. God had been providing for her all along. He'd just been very quiet about it. But the city sparkled in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in those towers, people were making decisions about millions of dollars. They wore expensive suits and ate at restaurants that cost more than most people's rent. They had no idea that one of their own was riding the bus to a homeless shelter. Eleanor closed her eyes and felt the bus sway gently. She was 70 years old, newly homeless, and completely alone. But for the first time in decades, she felt something unexpected. She felt free. Will this devoted mother really walk away with nothing after decades of sacrifice? St. Mary's Church basement hummed with fluorescent lights that flickered like dying stars. Eleanor descended the concrete steps, her suitcase wheels catching on each edge. The smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with unwashed bodies and institutional food. Rows of folding cots stretched across the basement floor. Chipped paint peeled from the walls like old skin. Eleanor's footsteps echoed in the cavernous space, announcing her arrival to 20 other displaced souls. "You must be Eleanor," said a woman in her 40s, approaching with a clipboard. "I'm Janet, the shelter coordinator. We'll take care of you, honey." The condescension in Janet's voice was gentle but unmistakable. Eleanor had heard that tone before, the way people spoke to elderly women, assuming confusion and helplessness. She nodded politely and followed Janet to cot number 14. "Bathrooms down the hall," Janet explained slowly, as if Eleanor might not understand. "Dinner's at 6, lights out at 10. We ask everyone to be respectful of the rules." Eleanor unpacked her few belongings into the small metal locker beside her cot. The scratchy wool blanket reminded her of her childhood, when her grandmother would wrap her in similar fabric during cold winters. But this wasn't childhood. This was survival. A younger woman on the adjacent cot watched Eleanor with curious eyes. "First time?" she asked. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "You get used to it. Name's Crystal. Been here 6 months since my boyfriend kicked me out." Crystal was perhaps 30, with tired eyes and premature lines around her mouth. "What's your story?" Eleanor folded her clothes carefully. "Family situation." Crystal nodded knowingly. "Kids these days. No respect for their elders. My own daughter won't even return my calls." During dinner, Eleanor sat quietly while conversations flowed around her. The other residents shared stories of job loss, addiction, domestic violence, and bad luck. Each tale was different, but they all ended in the same place: metal cots in a church basement. "The trick is staying invisible," whispered Mrs. Garcia, an elderly Latina woman who'd been homeless for 2 years. Don't cause trouble. Don't ask questions. Just survive until something better comes along. Eleanor listened and learned. She organized the communal supply closet without being asked, creating an efficient system that impressed even Janet. She helped balance the meal budget when the coordinator struggled with basic math. "You're good with numbers," Jeanette observed, watching Eleanor calculate food costs per person. "I've had practice," Eleanor replied simply. But her efficiency went unnoticed by most. To them, she was just another elderly woman taking up space. The stereotype was comfortable, familiar. It required no deeper thinking. Will anyone recognize there's more to this quiet woman? The next morning, Eleanor dressed in her best clothes and began the hunt for employment. Downtown Chicago sparkled with possibility, its glass towers reflecting ambition and success. She rode the elevator to the 23rd floor of a corporate building, her resume printed on good paper. The waiting room was all marble and mahogany, designed to intimidate. Younger job seekers sat in leather chairs, scrolling through phones and adjusting their expensive suits. Eleanor felt their eyes cataloging her discount store clothing and practical shoes. "Eleanor Williams?" The hiring manager was a woman in her 30s with perfect makeup and a power suit that cost more than Eleanor's monthly shelter fee. The interview lasted exactly 12 minutes. Eleanor answered questions about her work history, her availability, and her computer skills. She mentioned her experience with financial analysis and portfolio management, hoping to spark interest. "We're looking for someone more energetic," the hiring manager said, her smile professionally polite. "Someone who can grow with the company. I'm sure you understand." Eleanor understood perfectly. She was too old, too quiet, too expendable. The woman never asked about her financial background or analytical skills. She saw gray hair and assumed incompetence. The next office was worse. The interviewer kept checking his phone while Eleanor spoke. He interrupted her twice to take calls, treating her like furniture that happened to speak. "Shouldn't you be enjoying retirement?" he asked when she mentioned needing full-time work. "My grandmother spends her days gardening and watching her stories on TV." Eleanor wanted to explain that not everyone had the luxury of retirement, that Social Security wasn't enough to survive on, that dignity meant earning your keep, no matter your age. Instead, she thanked him for his time and left. The security guard at the third office escorted her out after she'd waited 2 hours past her appointment time. "No loitering," he said firmly. "This is a place of business." Eleanor stood on the sidewalk, watching young professionals stride past with purpose and confidence. She'd built her wealth by observing these same corridors, listening to conversations, making careful investments. Now she was invisible to them. Will she ever find someone who sees her true worth? That evening, back in the shelter, Eleanor overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Marcus was hosting a barbecue in the backyard of her former home. The neighbors were invited. Crystal had seen it on social media. "Look at this," Crystal said, showing Eleanor her phone. "Your son's having a party. Posted it on Facebook with the caption, 'Finally free to live my life.'" Eleanor stared at the screen. Marcus stood beside a grill, beer in hand, laughing with the same neighbors who'd watched her leave with pity. Brittany posed beside him, her smile radiant with victory. The comments were even worse. "Good for you, Marcus. Family boundaries are important. You did the right thing. She was lucky to have you as long as she did. Sometimes tough love is the only way." Eleanor handed the phone back to Crystal. Her throat felt tight, but she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers who had their own problems. "I'm sorry," Crystal said softly. "That's got to hurt." Eleanor nodded. It did hurt. But something else was growing alongside the pain. Something that had been dormant for too long. The next afternoon, Eleanor walked to the grocery store with her few remaining dollars. She needed basics. soap, toothpaste, maybe some fruit to supplement the shelter meals. The store was crowded with the after-work rush. At the checkout line, Eleanor's EBT card was declined. The system showed her account had been frozen, some bureaucratic error that would take weeks to resolve. She fumbled for her wallet, counting out exact change from her coin purse. "Ma'am, you need to step aside," the cashier said loudly. "There's a line behind you." Eleanor's hands shook as she counted quarters and dimes. The total was $12.47. She had $12.50 in coins, but one of the quarters was Canadian and wouldn't register. "Come on, lady," said a teenager behind her. "Some of us have places to be." Eleanor looked up. The teenager was maybe 17, with expensive sneakers and a phone that cost more than Eleanor's entire monthly budget. He was sighing dramatically, making a show of checking his watch. "Old people shouldn't shop during rush hour," he said to his friend. "They move too slow." Eleanor's hands trembled as she searched for another quarter. Coins scattered across the floor, rolling under the counter. The sound of metal hitting linoleum echoed through the store like scattered hopes. Other customers stepped around her, some offering polite smiles, others shaking their heads in annoyance. The cashier drummed her fingers impatiently on the register. Eleanor got on her hands and knees, collecting coins from the dirty floor. Her dignity, carefully maintained through decades of struggle, finally cracked. She was a 70-year-old woman, crawling on a grocery store floor while strangers watched with pity and irritation. She found the quarter under a promotional display. As she stood up, brushing dust from her knees, something inside her shifted. She'd spent 30 years being invisible, being underestimated, being dismissed. She'd accepted it as the price of her secret. But as she handed the cashier exact change and walked out with her small bag of groceries, Eleanor made a decision that would change everything. Will this be the moment that changes everything? Eleanor lay on her narrow cot at 3 a.m., listening to the symphony of the homeless. Mrs. Garcia muttered prayers in Spanish. Crystal tossed restlessly, fighting demons in her dreams. Someone near the back wall snored with the rhythm of a broken engine. Moonlight filtered through basement windows, casting geometric shadows across the concrete floor. The city never truly slept. Distant sirens wailed like urban lullabies, and traffic hummed its endless song of motion and purpose. Eleanor stared at the water-stained ceiling tiles, counting the familiar brown spots she'd memorized over the past week. Spot number 7 looked like a bird in flight. Spot number 12 resembled Marcus as a child, arms outstretched for a hug she'd always given freely. Her wallet lay open beside her pillow. Inside, tucked behind her expired driver's license, was a business card worn soft from decades of handling. The elegant script read, "Peterson and Associates, Private Wealth Management." Below that, in smaller font, "Discretionary Services for High Net Worth Individuals." She'd kept the card for 30 years, through moves and marriage, through Marcus's childhood and her own aging, a talisman of a life she'd carefully hidden from everyone who mattered. "Maybe I should have fought back sooner," she whispered to the darkness. Her mind drifted to memories that felt like scenes from someone else's life. Marcus, at 8 years old, sobbing in her arms after his biological mother's funeral. She'd promised him he'd never be alone again. She'd kept that promise for 27 years, working multiple jobs, sacrificing her own comfort for his future. High school graduation, Marcus, in his cap and gown, searching the crowd until he found her face. His smile when she cheered louder than any biological parent. The pride in his eyes when he said, "I couldn't have done this without you, Eleanor." His wedding day. She'd walked him down the aisle because his biological father had never been in the picture. Brittany had smiled at her then, called her mom, promised to take care of Marcus the way Eleanor had. "I gave him everything," Eleanor whispered. "Was love not enough?" but even as she asked the question, she knew the answer. Love hadn't been enough, because she'd hidden the most important part of herself. She'd let everyone believe she was just a janitor, just a poor woman surviving on charity. She'd thought humility would protect them both. Instead, it had made her disposable. The memories shifted, pulling her deeper into the past. 1995, the gleaming office tower at 233 North Michigan Avenue. Eleanor pushed her cleaning cart down carpeted hallways that smelled of money and ambition. Her shift started at 11 p.m. when the executives went home to their suburban mansions. She'd been invisible then, too, but invisibility had been her superpower. The mahogany conference room on the 42nd floor. Eleanor emptied trash bins while financial advisors left their notes scattered across the table. Market projections, insider information, merger announcements that wouldn't be public for weeks. She'd started small, $100 here, $50 there, careful investments based on conversations she'd overheard while dusting shelves and vacuuming floors. The cleaning lady who nobody noticed, who heard everything. Her portfolio grew slowly, carefully. She'd reinvested profits and diversified holdings. Real estate, technology stocks before the boom, pharmaceutical companies before breakthrough drugs hit the market. She'd been patient, methodical, invisible. The phone calls to Mr. Peterson always happened during her lunch breaks, from payphones in downtown Chicago. She'd give instructions in careful whispers, never leaving paper trails that could lead back to her day job. "I want to disappear," she'd told him once. "Let people think I'm just the cleaning lady. Let them think I'm poor. It's safer that way." Mr. Peterson had understood. His firm specialized in discretionary wealth management for people who preferred anonymity, politicians who needed clean money, celebrities hiding assets from expensive divorces, business owners protecting wealth from lawsuits. Eleanor had been their most unusual client, a janitor who'd built an empire from overheard conversations and careful observations. But her money was as green as anyone else's, and her investment instincts were better than most MBA graduates. The Canadians and their misleading money men had clung to a wholesome, "we will find a way." By 2000, she was worth $10 million. By 2010, $50 million. The money had grown while she'd aged, compounding in secret accounts while she rode the bus to work and clipped coupons for groceries. She'd hidden her success to protect Marcus. Rich people became targets. They faced kidnapping threats, gold-digging relationships, and family members who suddenly developed expensive problems. She'd wanted Marcus to love her for who she was, not what she owned. But her protection had backfired. By making herself appear worthless, she'd become worthless to the people who should have valued her most. Eleanor sat up on her cot, her decision crystallizing in the darkness. She'd spent 3 decades building wealth while pretending to be poor. She'd accumulated power while acting powerless. She'd become invisible by choice. But invisibility was a double-edged sword. Tomorrow she would make a phone call. Not from a payphone or in whispers, but clearly and confidently. She would reclaim the power she'd hidden for too long. The woman who'd crawled on a grocery store floor collecting scattered coins was gone. In her place sat someone who'd forgotten her own strength. Someone who'd built a financial empire, one overheard conversation at a time. Eleanor reached for her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Mr. Peterson's number was still there, updated annually, but never called from this device. She'd been careful for so long, paranoid about digital trails and electronic records. But paranoia was just another form of fear, and Eleanor was tired of being afraid. She composed a text message. "Mr. Peterson, this is Eleanor Williams. We need to meet. It's time to discuss my holdings and make some changes. I'm ready to come out of the shadows." She stared at the message for 5 minutes before hitting send. The response came within 30 seconds, despite the late hour. Mrs. Williams. I've been wondering when you'd call. My office tomorrow at 2 p.m. We have much to discuss. Eleanor smiled in the darkness. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be recognized, to be taken seriously, to matter. Will Eleanor finally reveal the truth that could change everything? The Chicago Public Library's computer terminal hummed quietly as Eleanor logged into her secure accounts. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny golden coins. The familiar scent of old books mixed with fresh coffee from the cafe upstairs. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising confidence. Password after password, each one unlocking another piece of her hidden empire. Investment accounts, real estate holdings, municipal bonds, international funds. The numbers on the screen made her breath catch. $127,463,891.42. Plus change. Her portfolio had grown by $27 million during the 8 days she'd been homeless. While she'd slept on a church cot and counted coins for groceries, her investments had earned more money than most people would see in a lifetime. Eleanor scrolled through the detailed reports. Her pharmaceutical stocks had surged after a breakthrough Alzheimer's drug announcement. The tech company she'd invested in 15 years ago had just secured a government contract. Her real estate holdings in downtown Chicago had appreciated another 12%. She'd built this fortune one careful decision at a time, guided by conversations overheard while emptying trash bins and mopping floors. The executives had spoken freely around her, treating her like furniture that happened to have ears. Their careless words had become her careful investments. Eleanor pulled out a fresh notebook and began calculating. She wrote numbers in neat columns, her handwriting steady despite the magnitude of what she was planning. After 30 minutes, she closed the notebook and picked up her phone. "Peterson and Associates," answered a crisp voice. "This is Eleanor Williams. I have a 2 p.m. appointment with Mr. Peterson." "Of course, Mrs. Williams. He's been expecting your call for quite some time." The law office of Morrison, Drake and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Chicago's financial district. Eleanor rode the elevator to the 48th floor, watching the city shrink below her. She'd cleaned offices like this one for decades, always taking the service elevator, always staying invisible. Today, she entered through the main reception area. The lobby was all marble and mahogany, designed to impress clients who measured success in millions. Fresh orchids adorned glass tables. Original artwork hung on walls that probably cost more than most people's homes. "Mrs. Williams?" A young woman in an expensive suit approached with a tablet. "Mr. Morrison is ready to see you." Eleanor followed her down a hallway lined with portraits of distinguished lawyers. Through glass-walled conference rooms, she glimpsed other meetings in progress. Mergers and acquisitions, inheritance disputes, business deals that would reshape industries. James Morrison was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 50, with silver hair and intelligent eyes that assessed her carefully. His office overlooked Lake Michigan, the water stretching to the horizon like liquid money. "Mrs. Williams, please sit." He gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than a month's rent. "Your wealth manager speaks very highly of your investment acumen." Eleanor sat down and placed her purse carefully beside her. "I need your help with some family matters." "Of course. What specifically?" "I want to revoke all existing inheritance arrangements," Eleanor said quietly. "Everything. Complete disinheritance of my adopted son and his wife." Morrison's pen stopped moving across his legal pad. "Mrs. Williams, you're talking about an estate worth approximately $127 million? $127.4 million as of this morning," Eleanor corrected. "Plus real estate holdings worth approximately $15 million more." The lawyer's professional composure cracked slightly. "Ma'am, forgive me, but we've never represented anyone of your apparent circumstances who possessed assets of this magnitude." Eleanor understood. She looked like a homeless woman because she was a homeless woman. Her clothes came from discount stores. Her shoes were practical rather than fashionable. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth of any kind. "Appearances can be deceiving," she said simply. "I've spent 30 years ensuring that people underestimated me. It's been remarkably effective." Morrison made several phone calls to verify her accounts. Each confirmation made his eyes widen further. Eleanor waited patiently, watching boats move across Lake Michigan like toys in a bathtub. "Your assets are extraordinary," Morrison said finally. "But are you certain about complete disinheritance? These decisions are difficult to reverse." Eleanor thought about Marcus recording her departure from the house, about Brittany's cruel words, about the neighborhood barbecue celebrating her absence, about crawling on a grocery store floor while strangers laughed. "I'm certain," she said, "but I want to give them a chance to earn forgiveness." An hour later, Eleanor had signed preliminary documents and outlined her plan. Morrison would handle the legal framework. She would handle the confrontation. Eleanor composed a text message to Marcus. "I need to speak with you and Brittany tonight. It's important. Can you meet me at the house at 7 p.m.? There's something you need to know about my situation." The response came quickly. "Fine, make it quick. We have dinner reservations at 8. Eleanor spent the afternoon at a small cafe near the shelter, planning her approach. She ordered coffee and a sandwich, paying with a $100 bill that made the cashier look twice. Eleanor smiled and told her to keep the change. The sun was setting when Eleanor stood on the front porch of her former home. She'd walked this path thousands of times, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she wasn't the powerless woman who'd been discarded. Tonight, she was someone else entirely. Marcus opened the door with obvious irritation. "You're 5 minutes late." "Traffic was heavy," Eleanor replied, stepping into the living room that had been her sanctuary for 30 years. Brittany sat on the sofa, checking her phone and sighing dramatically. The furniture was the same, but the family photos had been removed. Eleanor's face had been erased from the walls as thoroughly as her presence had been erased from their lives. New decorations reflected Brittany's taste: modern, expensive, cold. "So what's this about?" Marcus asked, remaining standing to emphasize that this would be brief. "We really do have reservations." Eleanor sat in her old chair, the velvet armchair where she'd read bedtime stories to young Marcus. The fabric still held the shape of her body, a ghost of better times. "I wanted to discuss my financial situation," she said calmly. Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. "Your financial situation? Eleanor, you're living in a homeless shelter. What financial situation?" Eleanor reached into her purse and withdrew a leather portfolio. She placed it on the coffee table between them, the same table where Marcus had slammed the eviction notice 8 days ago. "These are my current holdings," she said quietly. Brittany glanced up from her phone with minimal interest. "Holdings? You mean your Social Security statements?" Eleanor opened the portfolio to reveal the first page of her investment summary. The numbers were printed in clear, professional font across official letterhead from Peterson & Associates. Marcus leaned forward and read the page. His face changed color as his eyes moved across the figures. This says $127 million. "That's correct," Eleanor replied. Brittany snatched the papers from Marcus's hands. Her perfectly manicured fingers traced the numbers as if they might disappear. "Where did you get this money? This has to be fake." Eleanor reached into the portfolio and withdrew additional documents. Bank statements from 5 different institutions, real estate deeds for properties in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit, investment certificates for blue-chip stocks and municipal bonds. I earned every penny through patience, wisdom, and careful observation. Eleanor said, I spent 30 years building this portfolio while working as a night janitor in the financial district. Marcus sat down heavily on the sofa. You're rich? You've been rich this whole time? I've been wealthy for most of your adult life, Eleanor confirmed. I chose to live modestly to protect both of us. Wealthy people become targets. I wanted you to love me for who I was, not what I owned. Brittany's voice rose to a shrill pitch. You let us think you were poor. You let us support you. Eleanor's smile was gentle but sharp. You never supported me, dear. I paid my own bills from my investment income. I bought my own groceries. I maintained my own insurance. You simply allowed me to live in the house I'd been living in for 30 years. Marcus stood up and began pacing. You have to share this with us. We're family. Am I? Eleanor asked quietly. Because 8 days ago, you told me I wasn't real family. You said blood matters. You recorded my departure for legal protection. Legal protection. She reached into her purse again and withdrew a small digital recorder. I've been documenting our interactions since you served me the eviction notice. Would you like to hear what you said about me? Eleanor pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room. She's not even real family. She's been freeloading for decades. It's time she learned her place. Brittany's voice followed. Old people need to understand they can't just take advantage of younger generations forever. Eleanor stopped the recording. I have hours of similar conversations, including your Facebook posts about being finally free and your neighbor's comments about me knowing my place. Marcus's face had gone pale. Eleanor, we didn't mean... You meant every word, Eleanor interrupted gently, and that's your right. But actions have consequences. She reached into the portfolio one final time and withdrew a legal document bearing Morrison's letterhead. I've instructed my attorney to begin disinheritance proceedings. As of tomorrow morning, you will no longer be mentioned in my will. Brittany stood up so quickly she knocked over her wine glass. Red wine spread across the white carpet like spilled blood. You can't do that. We're your family. Eleanor's voice remained perfectly calm. I thought we established that blood matters, that I'm not real family. Marcus dropped to his knees beside Eleanor's chair. Please, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Brittany was wrong. We can fix this. Can we? Eleanor asked. Because I've learned something important this week. When people show you who they really are, believe them. She stood up and gathered her documents. However, I'm not entirely without mercy. You have 24 hours to decide if you want to make a public apology and earn a second chance. Public? Brittany's voice cracked. Eleanor smiled, and for the first time in 8 days, it reached her eyes. You made my humiliation public. Your redemption should be equally visible. She moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? I'll need you to text me your decision by tomorrow at 7 p.m. I have dinner reservations. As Eleanor walked down the front path, she heard raised voices through the windows. Brittany was screaming about lawsuits and fairness. Marcus was pleading for time to think. Eleanor pulled out her phone and called a taxi. When the driver asked for her destination, she gave him the address of the Four Seasons Hotel. The Four Seasons? He asked, looking at her simple clothes. Eleanor smiled and handed him a $50 tip before the ride even began. The penthouse suite, please. I believe they're expecting me. I built an empire while you slept. The words echoed in her mind as Chicago's lights blurred past the taxi window. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Will Marcus swallow his pride or lose everything forever? The morning sun cast long shadows across Millennium Park as Eleanor walked toward the gathering crowd. She'd chosen this location carefully. public enough for visibility, symbolic enough for meaning. The same park where she'd brought 8-year-old Marcus to feed ducks and dream about his future. Today, Chicago's morning commuters slowed their pace as they noticed the unusual assembly. Word had spread through social media overnight. The homeless woman who turned out to be a secret millionaire, the adopted son who threw out his mother, the public apology that would either heal a family or destroy it forever. Eleanor wore a simple navy dress and her grandmother's pearl earrings. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth. She'd learned long ago that true power whispered rather than shouted. "Crowder," David said. His voice was a... Marcus stood near the crown fountain, his face pale and drawn. He'd barely slept, according to the 17 text messages he'd sent Eleanor throughout the night, each message more desperate than the last. Apologies mixed with justifications, mixed with pleas for private reconciliation. Eleanor had responded to only one. Millennium Park, 11 a.m. Bring your courage. Brittany was notably absent. According to Marcus's final text, she'd left at 2 a.m. with 2 suitcases and a lawyer's business card. Some relationships couldn't survive the death of easy money. A small crowd had gathered, maybe 50 people, drawn by curiosity and social media posts. Local news crews were setting up cameras. Someone had live-streamed Eleanor's story on TikTok, and it had exploded overnight. The secret millionaire was trending across multiple platforms. Eleanor approached Marcus slowly. He looked older than his 35 years, aged by a single night of consequences. His expensive suit couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. "You came?" Eleanor said quietly. "I had to." Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Eleanor, I need to make this right." Eleanor nodded toward the growing crowd. "Then do it." Marcus looked at the faces surrounding them. Commuters with phones, reporters with notepads, neighbors from their old street who'd driven downtown to witness this strange spectacle. His humiliation would be as public as hers had been. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. The crowd quieted, sensing something significant was about to happen. "My name is Marcus Williams," he began, his voice shaking. 8 days ago, I evicted my adoptive mother from her home. I told her she wasn't real family. I recorded her leaving and posted about being finally free on social media. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones rose to capture every word. "I was wrong," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "Eleanor Williams raised me from the age of 8. She worked multiple jobs to pay for my education. She sacrificed her own comfort for my future. She loved me unconditionally for 27 years. A woman in the crowd shook her head disapprovingly. "How could you do that to your mother?" Marcus looked directly at Eleanor. "Because I thought she was poor. Because I thought she needed me more than I needed her. Because I let my wife convince me that caring for elderly family was a burden instead of a privilege." Eleanor felt something shifting in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced when 8-year-old Marcus had first called her mom. "I found out yesterday that Eleanor is worth over $100 million, Marcus continued. Money she earned through decades of careful investment and financial wisdom. Money she never told me about because she wanted me to love her for who she was, not what she owned." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Several people pulled out phones to Google Eleanor's name. The hashtag #SecretMillionaire was gaining momentum in real time. "She could have revealed her wealth at any time," Marcus said. "She could have bought a mansion and lived like a queen. Instead, she chose to live modestly and invest in my future. She chose love over luxury." An elderly black man in the crowd stepped forward. "Son, you threw away a treasure." Marcus nodded, tears starting to flow. "I know. And I'm here to publicly apologize and beg for forgiveness I don't deserve." He turned to face Eleanor directly. "Mom, because that's what you are. That's what you've always been. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry for embarrassing you. I'm sorry for making you feel worthless when you're the most valuable person in my life. Eleanor felt 30 years of love and 8 days of pain colliding in her heart. The crowd around them seemed to fade away. For a moment, it was just her and the 8-year-old boy who'd needed a mother. I forgive you, she said quietly, but her voice carried across the park. You're still my son. The crowd erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Beautiful!" Another person wiped away tears. Phone cameras captured the moment Eleanor opened her arms and Marcus collapsed into her embrace. But Eleanor wasn't finished. She stepped back and addressed the crowd directly. I want to share something about assumptions, she said, her voice clear and strong. For 8 days, I lived in a homeless shelter. I was dismissed by employers, condescended to by service workers, and ignored by people who assumed my worth based on my appearance. The crowd listened intently. The morning commute had become something more important. I was the same person with $100 or $100 million, Eleanor continued. My intelligence didn't change. My experience didn't diminish. My capacity for love remained constant. Only other people's perceptions shifted. A young woman near the front called out, "What's your message for people watching?" Eleanor smiled, the same gentle smile that had comforted Marcus through childhood nightmares and adolescent heartbreaks. Worth isn't measured in bank accounts, she said. Every person you meet carries invisible struggles and hidden strengths. The grocery store clerk might be supporting 3 children. The homeless veteran might have saved lives in combat. The elderly woman counting coins might have built an empire. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Before you judge someone's value, remember that appearances are often carefully crafted illusions. I hid my wealth for 30 years. Other people hide their poverty, their pain, their brilliance behind masks of normalcy. Eleanor reached into her purse and withdrew a prepared statement. Today, I'm announcing the establishment of the Invisible Strength Foundation. $50 million, dedicated to elder care, homeless services, and financial literacy programs. The crowd erupted again. Reporters scribbled frantically. Social media posts exploded across platforms. Marcus will serve as the foundation's volunteer coordinator, Eleanor announced. He's going to earn his inheritance through service to the communities he once judged. Marcus straightened his shoulders. For the first time in 8 days, purpose replaced panic in his eyes. Eleanor looked out at the crowd one final time. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves the chance to prove their worth beyond first impressions. Will this story inspire others to look beyond appearances and treat every person with dignity? 3 months later, Eleanor stood in her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Willis Tower, the same building where she'd once pushed a cleaning cart down empty hallways. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Lake Michigan stretched to the horizon like a mirror reflecting infinite possibilities. The Invisible Strength Foundation hummed with purposeful energy around her. Young social workers answered phones, connecting elderly callers with resources. Financial literacy instructors prepared workshops for homeless shelter residents. Grant writers crafted proposals to expand services across the Midwest. Awards lined the walls now. Recognition from the Chicago City Council, the Illinois Department of Aging, and the National Coalition for the Homeless. Eleanor's story had sparked a national conversation about ageism and the invisible struggles of older Americans. But the award she treasured most sat on her desk, a handmade card from the St. Mary's Church shelter residents, thanking her for the new computer lab and job training program. Marcus knocked on her open door. 3 months of volunteer service had changed him. His expensive suits had been replaced by practical clothes suitable for shelter work, His soft hands now bore calluses from construction projects. Most importantly, his eyes held the humility that comes from serving others. "The afternoon volunteers are here," he said. "Mrs. Garcia wants to thank you personally for the new housing placement." Eleanor smiled. Mrs. Garcia had been one of her first success stories, moved from the church basement to a subsidized apartment with wraparound services. Now she volunteered at the foundation, using her bilingual skills to help other Spanish-speaking seniors navigate the system. "And the afternoon news wants to interview you about the Washington expansion," Marcus continued. Eleanor's model was spreading. Senators were proposing federal legislation based on her foundation's approach. Other cities were launching similar programs. The invisible elderly were becoming visible, their stories shared across Black Stories platforms and Real Life Stories documentaries. "Schedule it for next week," Eleanor said. "Today, I want to visit the shelter." Eleanor still returned to St. Mary's basement every Friday, not as a resident, but as a reminder. She sat in the same plastic chair where she'd made the decision to reclaim her power. She listened to new arrivals share their stories, touching stories of loss, resilience, and hope. Each person who entered those doors carried invisible strength. Her job was helping them discover it. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Crystal, her former bunkmate. "Got the promotion. Assistant manager at the nonprofit. Thank you for believing in me." These messages arrived daily now, people whose lives had changed because someone finally saw their worth beyond their circumstances. People who'd learned that dignity wasn't determined by zip codes or bank balances. Eleanor packed her briefcase and headed for the elevator. The same elevator she'd ridden as a cleaning lady, invisible to the executives who shaped Chicago's financial landscape. Now, those same executives sought her advice on philanthropic investments and social impact strategies. As the elevator descended, Eleanor reflected on the journey from that first night in the shelter to this moment. She'd spent 30 years hiding her light under a bushel. Now she understood that light was meant to illuminate dark places, to reveal hidden truths, to guide others toward their own strength. The elevator reached the ground floor. Eleanor stepped into the marble lobby where she'd once been escorted out for loitering. Today, the security guard nodded respectfully and held the door. Outside, Chicago's afternoon energy pulsed around her. Commuters rushed past, each carrying their own invisible stories. Some struggled with poverty disguised by business suits. Others hid brilliant minds behind service uniforms. Many bore the weight of caring for aging parents, while society whispered about burdens and knowing your place. Eleanor understood now that her story wasn't unique. Millions of people faced daily assumptions about their worth, based on age, appearance, or circumstances. The only difference was that she'd finally found her voice. Never judge someone's worth by their appearance or circumstances. Have you ever been underestimated because of your age, appearance, or situation? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone who needs to hear it today. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who could use a reminder of their own invisible strength. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because everyone deserves to hear stories that remind them of their worth. What assumptions have people made about you that turned out to be completely wrong? Let's start a conversation about seeing beyond the surface. Your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter.
Behind every headline is a human story. At Beat Stories, we go deeper, where emotion meets evidence and drama reveals the system. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.